Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Because Football podcast. This is your host, Andrew, and today, very excited to talk about the American soccer landscape, specifically USL Championship, what it goes into founding and owning a club. So please welcome along with us to the show. We have Brett Johnson. Brett is the founder and CEO of Benevolent Capital, as well as principal owner of Rhode Island FC of the USL Championship. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. And I was fortunate to experience RAFC this summer. So I'll definitely be using that as some context for our conversation, and was fortunate to include the club and your incredible fans, specifically Defiance 1636. We got to shout those guys out in our New England footy documentary. But before we get into the specifics of the club, we'd like to know more about you and your background, and specifically, what's your first earliest memory of soccer?
Yeah, good. I guess it would be growing up in New York City and playing in Central Park. Yeah,
love that. Love it. What was that like?
Well, I mean, at that time, to date myself, Central Park was in the 70s. Central Park was not the beautiful park it is today. Mm-hmm. It was dirt fields and broken glass, and we would change into our cleats. You'd be lucky if your shoes were still up there after the game. But anyway, there's some good memories playing on the sand lots there in Central Park, and always loved the sport. And then we ended up going to a boarding school in Connecticut. And when I showed up there, I realized that there was a big world out there. Players, who were touching a ball much earlier than I was and had skill set that I would never, ever get to. I played 1 year in high school and then kind of retired and pursued other sports, if you will, but always loved the game and had a passion for it. But, as I like to say, it really kind of rekindled when I lived in London in my 20s. That brought me back to the beautiful game. Yeah.
Tell us about that. What was your local club or some of those experiences that kind of to brought you back in the flow with it?
Well, I spent a semester, I guess, going back a little bit earlier. I spent a semester when I was in college studying in London, and went to an Arsenal game at Highbury, and that's a bucket list experience.
Oh, yes.
Very, very happy I experienced that venue before they moved on to their new venue. But so I kind of caught the bug there, and I mean, I say it all the time. I don't think there's anything quite like English football. So Arsenal was kind of the gateway for me into the beautiful game, and I continue to have an affinity for Arsenal somewhere, in my DNA. Though obviously with Ipswich now, that's my primary loyalty. But anyway, that started to plant the initial seed, and then going back and living there for 5 years in my 20s. And I say this often, but it is the world's religion. Football is the world's religion, and I found anywhere in the world that I traveled, if I wanted to break the ice with someone, if I brought up football, it almost always 15 minutes later, we'd have a connection to each other, and that always made a difference, whether it was personally or professionally or both.
I second that. I believe strongly in that. I've also used that strategy, fortunately, everywhere. Again, it is what you would call it, religion, the language. It is that way to drive a deeper wedge with somebody. And speaking of the Highbury experiences, Highbury, right, to pronounce it properly. When I got into the game, it was through Man United in the early 2000s, but I was always jealous of Highbury as a ground, even just like the perspective you had on TV. It felt so intimate.
You didn't sit down in that stadium, and there were no real, in my recollection, you were all basically packed in there. I guess you technically had a seat, and obviously the game has evolved and the stadiums have evolved so much, but there was so much history and just experience to that. But standing up in a packed section of just diehard fans watching that game, it really stayed with me.
Tell us a little bit about thinking of football as an investment vehicle, something you want to support, and be a part of, kind of leading the game at that level, not just consuming it.
Yeah, that's a very clear sort of, I guess, launching point. So it was the MLS Cup in 2014. So that was probably late November or sometime in November of 2014. I was in LA Galaxy, who were playing the Dynamo in the finals, and I was watching the game, and Don Garber, the commissioner then and the commissioner still today, was talking about the expansion of the league. and he mentioned some fine cities in terms of the roadmap, but didn't mention Phoenix. And that to me was the epiphany, where I put my entrepreneurial hat on and effectively turned to my wife and said, you know what, I want to raise money and I want to buy the rights to a MLS expansion franchise and bring it to Phoenix. And, Phoenix was at the time one of the fastest growing, one of the biggest cities, and certainly demographically one of the best markets. Long story short, as I started to look into it, I realized at the time the pathway was coming through USL. I wasn't familiar with USL at that time, but quickly kind of got up to speed and then did further research to realize there was a club there called Arizona United. And I bought half of the team initially and partnered up with that owner. And ultimately that sparked it all. So it was the ambitions started, I guess, with the thought of bringing MLS there. But ultimately over time, what I've started to recognize, is what I believe, certainly from my balance sheet, in the right markets, I'm very bullish on USL as a phenomenal platform to invest in the beautiful game. And over time, obviously, that's where I started to go all in on projects like Rhode Island. And it's been incredible over the decade plus that I've been involved with USL to see how it's evolved.
Yeah. What are some of those things that you've seen change from the Phoenix Rising times to then RAFC? Because honestly, I think with USL in particular, every year it seems to be a new breakthrough, whether it's an impact a new team is making, whether it's just overall visibility of the league. Obviously, we'll get to the promotion relegation, but it's seems like such a rapid increase, and the bar is always getting higher. So what are some of the big things you've seen maybe on the ownership side as well as a cultural level?
Yeah, I think the quality of ownership groups has gone up exponentially, with the utmost respect from when I first entered the league, as an alternate governor of Arizona United. The quality and depth of ownership group has gone to a whole nother level. And I give, Louisville, John Neese and his ownership group, what they've done there, what the Reagan family did with Colorado Springs. But you can look sort of east to west, north to south across USL and look at just the quality of ownership groups in these markets and what they're doing with their brands. And now over time, there's a stadium arms race that's going on. And I'm very proud of what we've done with Rhode Island. But I think USL has established itself as a very clear alternate pathway to get involved with the beautiful game. And with the utmost respect to MLS, the current franchise fee structure really prices out, if you will, a lot of people. You're really only going to be able to get into that game if you're a billionaire and you're prepared to step up with that franchise fee. And then obviously all the requisite components that go with it, a substantial payroll, stadium, et cetera. So I think for all those that aren't in that category, there's USL.
Yeah. I'm curious if we could just dig a little bit. When you say like quality ownership, obviously the willingness to invest in like a specific number is a piece of that, but could you just explain a little bit? Because I think from the average fan or even people within the game in the industry, like obviously that's a big piece of this leadership, the intentions. Like I was just if we talk about MLS, we're in Atlanta recently for our documentary and talking about Atlanta United. And I wanted to know, what was the story there? How did this club just explode overnight? People pointed to Arthur Blank and his intention and leadership. So obviously there's a dollar amount associated with that, but for you and knowing kind of the ins and outs and the roles and responsibilities of an ownership group, like what goes into that for you and some of those different little categories and elements?
Yeah, I guess just technically, as a lot of people I think are aware, you need to have one individual that is the principal owner and owns at least 35% or more. So in that example, I'm the principal owner for Rhode Island Football Club. But I've now surrounded myself and raised capital from an incredible group of investors that want to be in soccer as an asset class, that like the opportunity that we have in Rhode Island with the world-class stadium. So investors are invested in both the team and that stadium. And then we are moving forward with all the surrounding real estate around, that was a big part of my business plan is, I do feel, and you could see this, using Atlanta, if you will, and I'm going to talk about the Braves as an example, SunTrust Park, or in my backyard here in LA Live, sports is often a real estate play. And I think in particular, what I'm really proud of relative to Rhode Island is we've gone into sort of a underserved, smaller market with an expansion team. We've built and financed a beautiful, truly, I mean, you've seen it firsthand. It's a world-class facility that's going to really stand the test of time. And now we'll develop all the surrounding real estate. We're going to provide critical housing in a market that's underserved with housing. And then I think in future phases, I can only imagine what we could put in terms of maybe a hotel, retail, et cetera, but create sort of a 365-day a year work, live, play destination from a market that's geographically fantastic. Pawtucket is so well situated, but Pawtucket was on the wrong side of several things, including the baseball team that picked up and left. So with total humility, I'm very proud of what we're doing in that market, what we're doing in that state, what we're doing in that region to literally and figuratively put, Rhode Island on the sporting, landscape.
Yeah, I came to love it. I mean, the stadium is incredible, as you said, and obviously with it being the first season you guys have been there is incredible. I will say this, rarely have I seen so many people in line for food, and I don't mean that I mean like the options for food and drink around, like it shows like people, I was like, I didn't realize Pawtucket is like a little foodie area, and there's a huge part of the game day experience. So
yeah,
so that is what
Rhode Island certainly, is unbelievable. It punches well above its weight class from a food perspective. I mean, candidly, Rhode Island punches above its weight class demographically with the beautiful game. And that was one of the things unbeknownst to a lot of people when there's a World Cup game on a Premier League game, Rhode Island is often in the top 10 for markets. So, that really stood out to me. And so again, it's great to bring in, and Rhode Islanders have been subject to what I'll call affiliate teams of major teams. So, Boston Red Sox have the Pawtucket Red Sox, the Boston Bruins have the Pawtucket Bruins, the hockey team. So what really makes a difference here, this is Rhode Island's team. And we will be introducing more teams for Rhode Islanders to get behind. So there's a complete difference, if you will, in terms of for Rhode Islanders, they can now flex their sporting muscle by getting behind Rhode Island FC. And you're seeing that culturally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's tapping into, history. A lot of what we talked about in the documentary as well is, Pawtucket was the site of 3 of the first 4 US Open Cup finals. Right, had a lot of big teams, and then you go within 45 minutes over to Fall River, which is technically Mass, but it's kind of that area that again has been a little overlooked, stuck between your New Yorks and Bostons. But I think having a team specifically for Rhode Island is massive, like you said, from representing people, giving an identity, something to rally around. A lot of people I met at that game were not soccer fans, but were people who had said the Paw Sox left. We were left empty-handed as a community when it came to sports. Yeah. There seems to be momentum. There's good energy here. We're just checking it out, and we're giving it a shot. And I think that's really important. Speaking of Paw Sox, minor league baseball, we had this conversation with Justin Papadakis as well as Chief Real Estate Officer of USL, and kind of goes in this larger conversation of the stadium and the importance of that to the club, but also to the community. I'm curious as well. I'm always trying to explain to non-soccer people how USL fits into soccer landscape. So if you're talking to people at, a dinner party or maybe like one of your kids' school events, how do you try to create a context and explain it? Because we kind of have the minor league baseball precedent, but like you said, it's different because there's not that specific like talent pipeline. It's not this extractive thing. It's like, hey, we're building this for the community. But I'm curious, I'm taking notes here on how you try to explain and contextualize the league.
Yeah, I mean, I often, for, if you will, the uninitiated, meaning they're not a big soccer fan, I usually do reference off of MLS. So if we're in LA and I'm talking to someone, I'm like, look, in LA, we have the Galaxy and LAFC. And I talk about the fact that I'm associated with a league called United Soccer League that currently operates in the 2nd level and 3rd level professionally on the men's side, and then has a Division I sanctioned women's team that operates at the same level as NWSL. So what's important, the evolution of this, and this kind of segues into Pro Rel, the adoption of promotion relegation, the intent for USL to have in quotes, a Premier League, so a Division I sanctioned league. So this is transitioning. The answer is transitioning in many respects. Like in the short period of time since we voted to move forward with that, as I start to talk to people about the adoption of promotion relegation, their faces light up and they're like, man, that's so fantastic. I literally was having lunch with a friend of mine yesterday, catching up. And I was talking about the fact that USL is moving forward with promotion relegation. And he was so fired up, because he likes watching foreign football clubs. He's got his teams, in England. And he's like, that's exactly what this country needs. So I think it's an exciting time. But I guess it's a long way of my saying that, in the past, you'd sit there and say, look, we play in second division, or if you owned a USL 1 club, you'd say third division. And then you would often maybe get a question of, well, at some point, are you going to go up to MLS? Or like I remember early days when I was talking about my aspirations in Rhode Island, I get people who would sit there and say, well, when will you be in MLS? And I'm explaining to them like, look, you really need, it's a distinct league. It's a distinct, I independently own this team. MLS is a cooperative. This is just a different league altogether. So still a lot of education to be had, if you will. But again, I think increasingly, and I was a big advocate of this, in effect, educating the balance of the incredible ownership groups in USL, that from my perspective, we had to do promotion relegation. We have to pursue 3 levels, meaning a Division I sanction, because otherwise just being that junior party to MLS, I don't know what we're candidly doing if that's the case. And because the reality is you could sit there and say you own a minor league baseball team that's affiliated with the Yankees. They pay your payroll. Everyone kind of gets that model. That's not what exists here. So again, from my perspective, like the long-term economic viability or sustainability of this isn't so clear to me just with the status quo. I can get my head around much, much more about the ability of the economic drivers that will come about because of promotion relegation, increased media rights, by far better proving ground for young players to get quality minutes, which I've also been a big advocate. I believe USL has got the potential to be the best development league in the world. And I think that's a fantastic marker for it to establish itself. Like the reality is the Premier League is going to be the Premier League. That's the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, all wrapped up into one, in my opinion. And it's going to continue to go from strength to strength. And the reality is USL can be an incredible partner to leagues like the Premier League, because I know firsthand from Ipswich, we have incredible talent. We have a Category 1 highest level academy in England, but we have an incredible amount of talented players that are playing effectively in empty stadiums, 5 coaches on one side, 5 coaches on the other. Imagine taking some of those players, having them play in Rhode Island in front of 10,000 fans week in and week out, converting a penalty kick in front of that kind of crucible, home or away. Nothing can replace it.
Yeah. Pressure, right? Pressure is the word. Like we were talking to Jeremy Allenbaugh, right? Jeremy, president of USL Championship. He was saying that pressure from a talent development piece. That conversation doesn't, or that piece doesn't often get included in this larger conversation of youth development, particularly in the US, which we've made incredible strides over my lifetime. I'm sure you've seen with the academies and now MLS and USL clubs are offering. It is that pressure. It's making it real. And we're seeing in recent years the transfers that are happening of USL players. And it's really like we haven't even gotten started. I'm sure you know the in and outs of that more. Like there's just so much room to grow on that side when it comes to that youth development piece in particular.
I'm so bullish on it. I mean, the overall market of transfers in terms of the quantum of dollars is staggering. And so USL is scraping just a small percentage of it, but it's growing. But I think it has the ability to be exponential from where it is today. And again, I with the utmost respect to MLS, MLS Next Pro, we have a lot of very good players on our Rhode Island roster that played, served time, if you will, in the MLS Next Pro. Again, the difference between the crowds they're playing in front of in Rhode Island versus that ecosystem is not even a fair fight. And again, over time, if you're aspiring, which most young players are doing, they're aspiring to go, in many instances, to go play overseas. In the United States, the best stepping stone for that by far is USL, not even a fair fight.
What do you see as with the promotion relegation? You were talking about some of the positives there. The reality is there is a downside. You're accepting the risk, the vulnerability of a potential relegation, right? And that's been a lot of the discussion of why MLS hasn't been open to it, is because of the valuations, all the amounts of capital invested. And people are like, hey, it's closed system. We know this is our bottom pretty much, but we know this is our ceiling. Whereas now USL has opportunity to tap into, not only said the economic piece of increased media rights and deals like that, the talent development and selling on players, but it also really nicely dovetails with the cultural desire for that on a not just soccer fan side, but I think Americans love that underdog story, the Cinderella story, and what goes with it. But could you talk about some of those discussions that were, behind the closed doors of, hey, what were some of the detractors or the negatives of things of like, hey, this could happen with this relegation system, but we still think the positives outweigh that?
Yeah, so I think USL was in a unique position to move forward on this because the economic repercussions of relegation are really not substantial. It's not. I mean, my team in England, Ipswich, is double promotion to the Premier League, relegation back to Championship this season. That has real consequences. Real consequences on going up, real consequences on going down. But that's why there's something so beautiful about promotion or relegation. Wrexham is a perfect example. Do you honestly think anyone would care about this Ryan Reynolds team if he bought in some closed league in Wales and all of a sudden put a bunch of money into it and they're dominating the Welsh league, winning the trophy every year? Like, no, it's just not. Who cares? Mm-hmm. But the fact that they're literally on the precipice of potentially going up to the Premier League 4 promotions in a row, I mean, that's unreal. So there's something about it, which again, I say all the time, it's the most American of concepts, which is ironic that it's not in America or hasn't been in America. But So I think USL economically, we had a pathway where we could adopt it. Like I speak specific to Rhode Island. If Rhode Island is up in the Premier League and we get relegated down to Championship, like, do I think our fan base evaporates? I don't. I think they're just as committed. I think in some respects, you've seen examples of that. I think Leeds season ticket holders actually increased when they got relegated from Premier League down to Championship. So I think there's just something about the ability for us to adopt it, which made sense. Mm-hmm. And, MLS has put themselves into a corner. It's not the worst corner in the world for them as long as they continue to get $600 million or plus for franchise fee expansions. But it's tough to turn to someone and say, thank you for coming into our league. And, you've been relegated to the B flight or you're off the Apple contract or whatever it would be. So I'm not quite sure how they adopt it, but, you've already started to see there are some owners in MLS that are starting to be more vocal on the fact that the reality is MLS probably needs to figure out their formula if they're going to try to be one of the top leagues in the world. And I think right now, my biggest criticism of North American football in general, if you have the chance, you're watching teams in England or Spain or Germany or Italy, almost without exception, over the product here in America. But that being said, I think Rhode Islanders, obviously, being very specific to it, local community grassroots football that you can get behind. You're going to have your local team and you're going to have your foreign club. And I like the thought of the local team fighting day in and day out to either go up or to avoid going down in a similar construct that exists pretty much everywhere else in the world. And
you're touching on kind of what I think is something that's unique, but also a big advantage of the American soccer culture is the very international, diverse nature of it, whether it's people who feel tied to, a country they're from or that their family heritage is from, which you certainly have. I saw so many, different Brazilian clubs, jerseys, stickers, everything, going around the Pawtucket area and New England, Portuguese as well. You got your Benficas, Lisbons, all those with those communities. But then people come newer to the game and they're going to have a Premier League side or maybe they like something they saw in Italy or in the Bundesliga. And that's something I think I was talking to someone on average, Americans support like 3 to 5 clubs, which is pretty amazing. It has that opportunity. But again, you can't really replace that local piece. On this podcast, we often talk about what makes this game so great, how it hooks us and makes us feel. And we can't forget that a piece of that is how the game looks. That's why we're proud to announce that this episode of the Because Football podcast is sponsored by Static Age Studio, a print shop and design studio that serves some of the biggest names out there. Think the Philadelphia Eagles, Nike, Puma, Stussy. Whether it's jerseys, training kits, fan tees, any merch you might need, Static Age Studio can help you with their high-quality screen printing, graphic design, embroidery, and DTG printing services all across the US and internationally. Check them out on Instagram at Static Age Studio or head to www.staticagestudio.com to get started. And if you mention the Because Football podcast, you'll get 15% off your first order. Don't wait. Get in touch with Dylan and the team now to continue loving the beautiful game in style. Now, let's get back to the episode. When it comes to you, obviously going to Brown, you had the Rhode Island connection, and so you knew that community very well. And we come back to this discussion of the quality ownership. What are some things you try to be intentional about, and maybe some things you want to be able to ramp up and enhance as you go forward, of making it clear that you are literally, obviously financially invested, but like emotionally in the area growing and things like that? Like, what do you hope is being transferred over to the fans as far as your energy as an ownership group behind the club, and how that can kind of feed into their own buy-in as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, my contribution as an owner was the work that I put in for years with my partner Dan Krober to make the stadium a reality. That was the toughest endeavor I've ever taken on, and in many respects, the odds of us getting the stadium built was really sort of, the odds were against us. So I'm very, very proud of the fact that we've done that. I'm very proud of the fact that the quality of the venue is even greater than I dreamed of. It's just truly spectacular. But for me, on a day-to-day basis, I actually, now my role is to be the ambassador for it and to put the best quality individuals in the right seats. So, our president, David Peart, who's just exceptional, Paul Byrne, who runs our stadium. I mean, both of those guys are former NFL executives that are running the respective sandboxes of the stadium and the team in Rhode Island. And then I'm very proud of the job that Cano Smith has done, first-time head coach, getting us all the way to the championship.
Yes,
sophomore year is a little bit tougher to date, but I have every faith. I mean, if I look at the quality of the players, and anyway, I'm not an owner that hits panic if all of a sudden we haven't, run the table, or we suffer a couple losses. I think too many clubs are way too quick to make changes in that regard. So anyway, long way of my saying that I love our technical staff, and I love the quality of players that we attract domestically and internationally. And so I think over time, and I'll give a good example. Literally a week ago, I was back east, and I was wearing my Rhode Island jacket, and I was at a restaurant, and a waiter comes up to me and sees my Rhode Island FC and starts talking to me and tells me how much his son loves going to the game. And I could pick up from his accent. I said, I asked him if he's from Jamaica, and he's like, yeah, we're from Jamaica. And I said, we have a young player, and he started finishing my sentence. He started, he knew all about our young Jamaican player, Dwayne Atkinson. But, it shows the connectivity in the community for people that, are proud to have Noah Jamaican players playing up the road from them and going. And the reality is, you get to talk to them after the game, you get autographs from them. I mean, there's something very personal about developing a relationship with a team like Rhode Island FC or other USL clubs. And I'm not trying to say it doesn't exist in MLS or elsewhere, but one of the real emphasis that we have culturally is making sure that there's connections with the community. Win or lose, we want our players, we need our players to be thanking the fans that are coming in. And I hear some stories about fans that are driving to Pittsburgh, flying to Colorado, going down to Charleston. That level of support and commitment, that family atmosphere, if you like, I mean, it's just something that I'm so grateful for. And it's something that I will never, ever take for granted. I will work every single day to try to reward their loyalty and support of the club.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know a friend of mine I've developed through this, Archie's Dribble Trips. He's a similar content creator. Comes down from Boston pretty much every game, right? And he's in there, and that's not an easy drive on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday or something. So it shows
tell him I want to meet him next time I'm in the States.
We'll set you up with he's great.
But again, I like saying I built relationships, and it's just great to see them, give a hug, a high five, if you will. I mean, look, I feel really, really blessed to be associated with it. I mean, especially given the fact that Canada, I do live 3,000 miles away from it. So I try to get in there as often as I can. But, regardless of whether I'm there in person, I'm certainly always there in spirit in terms of, this past Sunday, watching us come from behind against Las Vegas. If you had heard the screams coming from, my son and me watching the game, you would have really wondered what was going on in that television room.
People are like, this can't just be soccer, right? Second tier soccer giving this rise out of you guys. I did actually read that, though. I was reading in another interview you had done that when it comes to the games, you're not just, although you're calm in the overall management of the team, when it comes to games, you can't sit down. So I'm curious, what's been a match? Obviously, Rhode Island FC, I'm sure that ride to the final last year was crazy. But in general, can you think of it could be a football match or just sports one in general that you think of like you really hit your peak in terms of this game just drove you? It's an epic one that you had been in person or a part of. What kind of sticks out?
I mean, there's so many. I've been so blessed. And again, I don't take any of that for granted because anyone who's in sport will know just how incredibly rare it is to win hardware, if you will. And so I've been really, really fortunate between Phoenix Rising and Ipswich and Rhode Island FC. It's something like 7 trophies in 6 years. The promotions for Ipswich, magical. Mm-hmm. Phoenix Rising's run to the USL Cup was unbelievable.
The comeback games you guys had in the final even was insane.
In the penalty kicks, down 2-0 in the penalty kicks, like game over. And then the next thing you know, like literally 3 minutes later, we win 3-2. It was just surreal. But yeah, there's nothing like sport, nothing in sport. But again, it could be important. I mean, just this past Sunday, it's 76 minute in a tough game against Las Vegas. We're down 1-0, and then next thing you know, the next 20 minutes, it's like a completely different squad on the pitch, and you win 3-1. So there is nothing like the highs of sport. And it's a drug that you want more of. Like, I'm sure I'm not alone right now getting fired up for our game against Tampa on Saturday, because I'm just praying like the team that left the field the last 20 minutes is the team that shows up to start that game.
Yeah.
When I watch, my kids will start to count, when I sit down, and that count does not get high. I do prefer, I'm standing up right now. I do prefer to spend most of my day standing, if you will. But there are times when I go to Ipswich and I'm sitting, I'm blessed to sit in the director's box. I find it near, if anyone was kind of watching me, any chance I get, I'm trying to jump out of my seat, because I find it tough just to sit and watch a game. There's something about, when you're invested in it, I feel like maybe by standing, I feel like somehow I'm contributing to, somehow the psyche on the field, if you will.
Yeah. It's all the layers. The club I support, again, speaking to this multi-club thing, the club I support in the UK is Port Vale, who's, League One. And so I was listening to their owners give a talk, and they're like, you have this fan element where just emotionally you're bought in as a fan. Then there's a whole other level when you are like the leader of all this, when you're going to have to make decisions. You have some hand in this, but still during those 90 minutes, you're powerless. So it's like, it's this mix of emotions and possibilities. And speaking of that with Ipswich, has there been anything that you have seen from your experience there? Because there is certainly a trend of more American ownership and capital going into Europe in general, but specifically clubs in the UK. What have you kind of gathered and seen, and maybe have had your perspective change a little bit based on what you've seen on a cultural level there, or economic? Like, hey, what can a club mean, or what is it in that British context that you maybe try to bring back to Rhode Island FC and kind of your dealings stateside?
Yeah, Ipswich specifically, I'm most proud of being responsible for bringing Mark Ashton into Ipswich as the CEO. And Mark I knew him when he was at Bristol City. I met him. He came and presented to a USL board meeting. I was so blown away by him. I effectively knew that if I ever had an opportunity to do anything in England, I was going to do it with Mark. And so beyond blessed that when we acquired Ipswich, literally the first thing we did was hire Mark and put him in seat. And Mark went from a championship club down to a League One club. It was a big step, if you will, to go down for someone, especially of his pedigree. Mm-hmm. But Mark is hands down, in my opinion, the best CEO in the business. And he's proven in that. And he was, speaking of Manchester United, he if you will, in quotes, really discovered or, really saw the potential or the talent that is Kieran McKenna and brought him in as manager. And between the two of them, they're about as good a combination as you've seen. So as an American who's invested in English football, what I know is what I don't know. And I would never, ever try to think for 1 second that I'm going to make any decision on or off the pitch for Ipswich that's better than what Mark Ashton, and by extent, Kieran McKenna and their teams are going to do. So that's the credit that as an ownership group, we've been very clear to find the right talent and give them the latitude to run the business day in and day out. And they do a brilliant job on it. And I don't think it's an American thing, if you will. It's not an indictment of other owners, whether they're American or otherwise. I think the mistake that people make is you see this countless examples where someone has made a lot of money in a different business and they mistake that to think somehow they could be successful in sport. And the reality is that you can't and you won't. And if you are, it's luck, and it won't last. Like you just can't do this as a hobby. You got to put the professionals in there and you got to give them effectively the tools they need to be competitive. And then again, if not, then you'd have to make a change. But that's your problem. That's my role and I'm very, very happy that I don't have to really get involved. I get to enjoy the game and let them go and do the real substantive work.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing what you don't know, right, is a big thing I hear. Because again, we talk about these intersections of the cultural piece with like the business realities. And I think, it's a fascinating trend. But even just seeing on the side of fans and communities, it's like it's totally different in many ways. And it's important, I think, to respect that going into it.
Well, look, I'm sure I know there are a lot of owners that are, if you will, probably far, far more involved on the technical side than I am. But again, I very clear. I'm not calling Kano up on a Monday and going through, his decisions. It's his job. He and Michael Parker's, and that's their role with Rhode Island FC. And so the day that I think that I know more than someone like Kano, then we're all in trouble.
I'm going to use that as a very, very prescient, fortuitous time to pivot to our segment where we actually do have to pick a team. So we're going to move into our all-time five-a-side team. So the rules for you, Brett, and everybody listening who might not be familiar, you get to choose 4 players because you have to select yourself in the team. And you got to build around that. Goalkeeper optional. Some people use one of their 5 as a keeper.
I'll take Tim Howard. I'll just throw Tim Howard right now if I got to have someone.
Simple. Yep, go for it. Yep. So that's your team. Any player we could know or not. It could be somebody from your Central Park days. Who was the?
No. I mean, again, I would. Look, I love Pulisic. I love and I certainly would kind of lean towards picking an American on it. I loved in his prime. I loved Andrea Pirlo.
Such a classy player.
Zidane.
Where are you playing in that team, Brett? Where are you holding it down?
Man, as close to the sideline as possible,
In the shadows.
Yeah, absolutely. Just hopefully try not to get in the way of any of them and injure them by accident. There's so many players. And then I think about the teams that I've been blessed with, in Ipswich, the quality of players that we were able to assemble in League One that, brought us up to the Premier League. I mean, I don't even know where to begin, but guys like Leif Davis and Wes Burns and, Sammy Morsey, our captain. And I'll tell you, I really enjoyed, Delap last season, Liam Delap, when he was playing for us.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Just incredible to watch him play. But, Connor Chaplin, and anyway, like it's such a blessing to be involved with this sport in any capacity, as a fan or even to an extent, given what I'm blessed to be able to do. But you really do. Like I look forward to the weekends, like when it's in the brief off season, it's, the good news is when Ipswich is in the off season, Rhode Island's playing. So it's
so no true off season for
no, there is it's pretty much 52 weeks a year, which is good. But again, there are some windows or like the international break where you're like, oh man, I can't wait till they get back and
put on your thumbs, like
totally. Again. But, Rhode Island will take care of it this weekend or, at least have a game this weekend, which is good.
Yes. I think all those maybe have been picked. Obviously, the Ipswich guys would be first timers. Recently, we had an all Wimbledon side because we had Wimbledon going on. But yes, certainly Zizou and Pirlo, those guys are classics as part of this overall all-time roster of our.
And how did Port Vale get on your radar screen?
Well, it's another link I'll send you because I'm fortunate that the club was very welcoming and we've kind of collaborated on some pieces and they've had me in. But it was originally family connection. So my dad's side of the family back in the day was from Stoke-on-Trent. I went to visit at some point, college years, went to a match. Stoke City had an away match, so they weren't in town. So it was Vale. So I went and kind of got hooked there. And then the coolest part is that I had learned then just 2 years ago. So this was like 2013, I went to the first match. And then just 2 years ago, I learned at a family reunion, a relative had an old copy of a newspaper clipping. And it turned out my great-great-grandfather who had emigrated from Stoke to Trenton, New Jersey, had played in the Port Vale reserves back in
come on. That's awesome.
Right? So it was like this really cool full circle. And then it's just been great. We got, I think now there's 16 of us in a Port Vale North America WhatsApp group. And so we're represented from afar and really fortunate to have that connection.
There's a couple who are big Rhode Island FC supporters. And I met them years ago when we hadn't even started playing yet. But they're massive Port Vale. I was trying to see if I had them in my contacts. But anyway, you've got some.
They might be new ones because there is I met up with a friend of ours, Matt. We'll shout out Matt. He's lives in Rhode Island. He's been there, I think 4 years been in Rhode Island, but he's from Stoke, Vale fan, youth coach in Rhode Island area too. So maybe there's another couple.
Okay, I'm going to try to increase
Rhode Island
your.
Valley, and so
that's great. Maybe we have to get Port Vale to come over and play a game in the Rhode Island Stadium.
Hey, would love to help facilitate that. Talk about community connections and proud clubs. So love to see it. Brilliant. Last thing here, Brett. We've really been circling around this, but I always love to kind of put it into one succinct final sentence here. But could you complete the sentence? Because football.
It brings community together. Yeah. I mean, seeing what Rhode Island FC and the stadium are doing in Rhode Island, and then seeing now the resurgence, the renaissance that is Ipswich Town, and to see locally and afar what it means to the tractor boy and tractor girl nation, or the family, if you will. But it brings community together. It gives hope, gives inspiration. And again, I think about like young kids. When I watched this past weekend when we played Norwich, I saw all the highlights, leading up to the game. And you see the tens of thousands of Ipswich fans surrounding the stadium. But the biggest thing that I noticed was how many young kids were there. And I know countless individuals that are part of Ipswich family over the 5 years approximately that we've owned it, that have come up to me and expressed gratitude for kind of bringing their club back to life. Certainly they never thought when it was on the wrong side of League One, kind of facing the barrel of League Two, they certainly never thought they were going to be a couple of years later back up in the Premier League. But anyway, what I really struck by what they kept on saying was how the kids had all given up. The kids in the community were wearing Norwich jerseys because at the time Norwich was in the Premier League. The kids were wearing anything other than Ipswich. And I think the combination between the resurgence and candidly, Ed Sheeran helps as well. I think you now see all of the kids in that community with pride wearing it. And so that's important because that effectively establishes the next generation, which is really, really important for clubs that, have been around for 150 years. So longer answer than you were looking for, but again, the social and economic impact of these clubs, especially when they're going in the right direction and you have ownership groups that are truly, literally investing on and off the pitch. I think that's a virtuous cycle that's really important and needed more than ever in this world.
Yeah, 100%. It gives you chills, a lot of those stories, right? Especially the resurgence, and it's a wonderful thing what this game can do. That's why I'm obsessed, right? Why you are, why we love to talk about it and connect. But thank you so much, Brett, for sharing your time with us, for sharing your story.
What a pleasure, my friend. Really enjoyed our time together. And let's meet up at some point. Keep me posted if you're ever on the left coast. And then, conversely, as I'm back east, maybe next summer we have a reunion around a Rhode Island game. I'd love that.
For sure. Happy to. Great. Good. Thank you all for being here and for listening and for watching. All right. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.
Thank you.